Now, yes, I didn't see. What are you looking so sad about, Champ?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting things about. I'm late getting home, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, crazy. One time during my career, I was on a Formula One tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cat Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right, you know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian, bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Salute to Miss Cass. Without her, none of this would be possible. Salute to everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cat Sports, the Boxtorian. Today, light heavyweights of the 1980s. How's the family today? It's Monday. We're right back at the beginning of another big week of boxing history. We're going to talk about those light heavyweights of the 1980s, arguably the greatest and most talented decade for the 175-pound division. We're going to talk about a number of them today, briefly. We're going to talk about James Scott, the light heavyweight that was in prison. And HBO took the cameras and the commentators and everybody into the prison and the fighters from the outside, because James Scott was involved in a murder. He couldn't come out and fight, but he was so good that they took the boxing world in the prison to him. And he was a top 10 rated contender. The WBA had him at number 1 at one point. Okay, never got a title shot, but a number of top contenders went into the prison to fight it. We're going to talk about James Scott today and a number of other light heavyweight champions and contenders of the era. Today, all about the light heavyweights of the 80s. The whole week is going to be on the 80s. Tomorrow and Wednesday, we got a two-part series. We're going to talk about some epic fights of the 1980s. Part 1 tomorrow, part 2 Wednesday. Okay? All of that today and this week on Cast Sports, The Box Story, bringing you all that boxing history. Carlos Adames got it done like I thought he would this weekend. And then we got Keith Thurman, and this is fight week for Keith Thurman and Sebastian Fundora. I'm picking Fundora on that one. Might and bad for Keith. But that's this week. We will see. But how was everybody's weekend? Good to see everybody on this side of it. We got our fight of the day coming up, as we always start the show with a fight from the past, the fight of the day. Got another good one today. But light heavyweights of the 1980s is the show, and we're going to focus on the 80s this week. We got a whole truckload of fights coming up. We're going to cover briefly tomorrow and Wednesday for this week. And then we got the profile Friday. Will be a fighter from the 1980s. Okay? We appreciate everybody for stopping by today. And let's get ready to get into our fight of the day right now. Get that going. But spring is in the air. It's beautiful weather outside. And we're going to start off our big week of boxing history coming right at you. We had Monday. Got a huge week right in front of us. If you like boxing history, this is the place for you. Okay? So let's get into it. Get started with our fight of the day. We can get this show, get to these great light heavyweights. So now, without further ado, today's fight of the day. Okay, today's fight of the day is Bernard Hopkins versus Roy Jones Jr. 2. The rival, well, this fight took place, first of all, on April 3rd, 2010. The rivals, the rematch. Okay? So let's get into it. Bernard Hopkins versus Roy Jones Jr., April 3rd, 2010. The rivals, the rematch. Bernard Hopkins versus Roy Jones Jr. 2 was contested at the Mandalay Bay Event Center in Las Vegas, Nevada, pitting the 45-year-old former undisputed middleweight champion, Bernard Hopkins, against the 41-year-old former 40 division title holder, Roy Jones Jr., in a light heavyweight non-title fight at 175 pounds. The matchup served as a long-awaited sequel to their first encounter on May 22nd, 1993, at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C., where the then 24-year-old Jones defeated the 28-year-old Hopkins by unanimous decision to claim the vacant IBF middleweight title in both fighters' professional title debuts. It was the first title fight for both fighters in their first encounter. 17 years later, amid mutual animosity stemming from the original fight and their contrasting career trajectories, Hopkins maintaining elite status into his 40s, while Jones had declined after a dominant 1990s. Hopkins entered with a record of 50 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw, 32 knockouts as the reigning WBC light heavyweight champion, seeking revenge against the 54 win, 6 losses, 40 knockouts of Jones, entering this second encounter between the two. In a one-sided affair, Hopkins dominated with superior conditioning and power, outlanding Jones 184 of 526 total punches to 82 of 274, en route to a unanimous decision victory with judges' scores of 117-110 twice and 118-109 after 12 rounds. Wide decision victory for B-Hop in the second fight. The event, promoted by Golden Boy Promotions, drew approximately 150,000 pay-per-view buys and underscored Hopkins' remarkable longevity as he improved to 51 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw, while highlighting Jones' struggles in the later stages of his career. Now let's take a look at the 1993 encounter, the first fight. Let's take a look at that, the first fight between these two. Before we get to talking about the second fight, let's take a look at the first fight. Now, the first encounter between Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. occurred on May 22nd, 1993, at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C., where 8,500 spectators attended the fight for the vacant IBF middleweight title. At the time, Jones entered undefeated at 21-0 with 20 knockouts, while Hopkins stood at 22 wins, 1 loss with 16 knockouts, marking both fighters' initial opportunity to claim a world championship. Again, it was the first title fight for both fighters in that first fight. Jones dominated the early rounds with his exceptional speed and unorthodox style, frequently dropping his left hand low in a one-handed taunt while landing sharp combinations and powerful rights that staggered Hopkins. Hopkins, known for his toughness, absorbed the punishment and responded with resilient pressure, closing distance in the middle rounds to land body shots and clinch to slow Jones' rhythm, though he struggled to match the champion's quickness. In the later rounds, Hopkins mounted a comeback, winning the 11th and 12th with aggressive flurries and effective counters. But Jones maintained control overall, securing rounds 1 through 5, 7 through 10 by superior ring generalship and output. Jones won the first fight by unanimous decision after 12 rounds, with all 3 judges, Al DeVito, Henry Eugene Grant, and Lynn Carter, scoring it 116-112 in his favor. Comparback stats underscored Jones' edge as he landed 206 of 594 punches, 35% accuracy, compared to Hopkins, 153 of 670, 23%. Jones later claimed that he had fought the fight effectively one-handed due to a hand injury, describing his performance as effortless, while Hopkins expressed belief in the fight's closeness and hinted at future potential for a rematch, noting his late surge showed competitiveness against Jones' speed. Okay, so let's look at the fight of the day now, Jones Hopkins 2. And yeah, nobody knew, including the fighters, that the rematch would take 17 years to materialize, but it did. First fight 1993, the rematch wasn't until 2010, but eventually it happened. In the first fight, Hopkins was 28, Jones was 24. By the second fight, Hopkins was 45 years old and Jones was 41. Jones was 41, both in their 40s. Nobody even dreamt that would happen. Both fighters in their just about their prime for the first fight, and both 40 years old by the second fight. But let's take a look at it. Fight number 2. Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones 2. Fight of the day. Opening rounds. The opening rounds of Hopkins versus Jones 2 featured a tactical battle where the 45-year-old Hopkins leveraged his experience and physical strength to gradually assert control, while the 41-year-old Jones relied on remnants of his legendary speed to probe for counters. In the first round, the action was tentative, with Jones using jabs to test Hopkins' defenses from range. But Hopkins employed superior footwork and positioning to avoid clean connections and close the distance without absorbing damage. Rounds 2 and 3 saw Hopkins ramp up his aggression, landing effective body shots and a sharp right hand in the second round that reportedly opened a small cut near Jones' left eye. Jones slipped several advances and connected on occasional punches, but his output was limited, leading to early clinches as Hopkins pinned him against the ropes to neutralize Jones' movement. These exchanges highlighted Hopkins' strategy of inside fighting and body work to sap Jones' energy. By the fourth round, Hopkins solidified his dominance with consistent pressure and defensive counters, using his jab to dictate the pace, while Jones struggled to mount meaningful offense amid the growing clinch work. CompuBox stats underscored Hopkins' edge in the early going, where he outlanded Jones significantly overall, 184 total connects to 82, reflecting a pattern of superior accuracy and volume from the outset. This initial momentum shift set a tone of calculated control for Hopkins, contrasting Jones' more elusive but less effective approach. Mid to late rounds. As the fight progressed beyond the tentative opening rounds, where both fighters tested each other's range with jabs and footwork, Hopkins began to assert greater control by ramping up his offensive output. In rounds 5 through 8, Hopkins increased his pressure, backing Jones to the ropes and landing combinations to the body and head, while Jones attempted counters but showed signs of tiring, resulting in more frequent clinches to slow the pace. Jones managed occasional uppercuts in close range during round 8, but the action remained sporadic amid mutual warnings for shots to the back of the head. Rounds 9 and 10 saw Hopkins further dominate with effective uppercuts and hooks, targeting Jones' body and forcing defensive retreats. Jones' frustration became evident through erratic movements and verbal exchanges with the referee. In the championship rounds, 11 and 12, Jones mounted a desperate rally, doing combinations to close the distance, but Hopkins maintained control by using superior footwork to dictate range and clinch strategically to neutralize threats. Overall, CompuBox statistics reflected Hopkins' dominance, with him landing 184 of 526 punches thrown, 35% accuracy, compared to Jones' 82 of 274, 30% accuracy. BBO Sports TV in the building. Fighters of the day, BBO, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr. too. And the first fight was in 93 when both men were in their 20s. Hopkins was 28, Roy was 24. Nobody imagined the rematch would take 17 years. It was 2010, and both men were in their 40s by the rematch. Hopkins was 45, Roy was 41. Let's salute BBO. Tonight at 8 p.m., BBO Sports TV from the Sports Talk Network. So the fight went the distance, culminating in a unanimous decision victory for Bernard Hopkins. The three judges from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Don Trella, Gwen Trowbridge, and Dave Moretti, scored it. 117, 110 twice, and 113, 118, 109, widely, respectively, in Hopkins' favor. There you have it, the fight of the day. Here's your winner, the ageless Bernard Hopkins, oldest man to ever win a championship in boxing history. The legendary Bernard Hopkins. Okay, today's show is light heavyweights of the 1980s. Okay, let's take a look at that now. Light heavyweights of the 1980s. We're going to talk about some of the great light heavyweights that fought in that era, and we're going to talk about some fights, and we're going to talk about the fighter that was actually in prison, and they took the commentators, the cameras, HBO, Howard Cosell, Sugar Ray Leonard, and other commentators, and top contenders actually went to the prison for these fights. And James Scott actually rose to number one in the WBA. All this while he was in prison. Okay, so light heavyweights of the 1980s today. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Okay, let's get started. Light heavyweights of the 1980s today on Cast Sports, The Box Story, bringing you all of that boxing history. Okay? Yes, excuse me for 1 second. There we go. All right, starting out an entire new week of boxing history today. That was the fighters of the day. Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr. 2, the rematch. Took 17 years to materialize. They fought in their 20s, the first fight by the rematch. Both were in their 40s. Roy took 1, B-Hop took 2. Wasn't no use having a trilogy because, wow, it was in the 40s for the second fight. So nobody wanted to see that trilogy. I promise you. Could have been a trilogy if they would have fought the rematch a little bit earlier, like in the 90s, but they waited until 17 years later. The light heavyweights of the 1980s today. Let's take a look at that now. Now, the 1980s is widely regarded as a golden era for the light heavyweight division, transitioning from the brutal high-action wars of the late 1970s to the technical dominance of Michael Spinks, and eventually the rise of new stars later in the decade like Virgil Hill. Now, some key champions and contenders of the decade included Michael Spinks, Matthew Saad Muhammad, the White Muhammad Qawi, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Marvin Johnson, Yaki Lopez, Mike Rossman, James Scott, Virgil Hill, and Prince Charles Williams. Okay, so now let's take a look at James Scott's story. Remember, he fought from prison. Mike Rem, salute Mike Rem. Yeah, James Scott was in prison, and amazingly, the contenders and the cameras, the commentators, the producers, everybody went to him. He couldn't get out of prison to fight, so they went into prison to him. Amazing. Let's talk about it. That actually happened. Okay. Inside Rahway Prison. Now, and there's James Scott behind bars, doing a little training. Okay. Inside Rahway Prison. The light heavyweight contender James Scott became a contender while serving time in Rahway Prison. Ferdy Pacheco called it the boxing university, and Bob Hattrack, the prison warden, told the story. Yeah, this came from the guy that was the warden at the time. He told the story about this amazing situation. Salute Mike Grimm, EVO Sports TV, Miss Cass. Okay. Now, you would imagine that if an imprisoned boxer became a leading contender by having organized fights with the top contenders of the period behind the walls of a maximum security prison, you might have the plot line of a new Netflix series, and a scarcely believable one at that. But back in the 1970s, when light heavyweight prospect James Scott landed a lifetime in prison, his career didn't only carry on in prison, it thrived and got even better. Okay? You know, when he had started boxing, he was 10-0 when he went to prison, and everybody thought it was over. But his career not only ended, it thrived while he was in prison. Scott, who spent much of his youth in New Jersey correctional facilities, eventually moved to Florida for a fresh start, and there he turned pro. He was being managed by Hank Kaplan and promoted by Chris Dundee in 1974. Chris Dundee was the older brother of the legendary trainer, Angelo Dundee. And early wins over contenders Baby Boy Roll, Jesse Burnett, and Ray Anderson moved Scott to 10-0 and marked him as one to watch. But a fateful trip back home to his old New Jersey stomping grounds saw everything change. There was a bungled drug robbery in a Newark ghetto. It was 1975. Someone got killed. James was taken in, and he wouldn't breathe free air for the next 30 years. Okay? Ended up in prison for 30 years. He didn't get out until 2005. Okay? Went in 1975. So that's a shot of the warden, Bob Hattrack. He told this story here. Bob Hattrack was the warden at Rahway State Prison. His modus operandi was equipping convicts for life on the outside, no matter what they wanted to do. He wasn't just going to have them taught to become electricians, mechanics, and plumbers. If they wanted to sing, he wanted them to have musical options. If they wanted to paint, he'd give them an art department. And if they wanted to fight, he was going to start a boxing program. James Scott, a friend's light heavyweight contender, wanted to box. So Hattrack and Scott, and they went way back through the East Coast judiciary system. Hattrack on his way up on his chosen career path, and Scott on his way further into trouble. I remember when James was a 13-year-old, transferred to Trenton State Prison, Hattrack recalled, from his home in Oregon. Can you imagine that? A 13-year-old kid transferred to a maximum security state prison, and he had to carry a steel pipe around with him to keep the predators off of him. And then when he got out, he went to Florida. And we said goodbye on the front porch and promised to stay in touch with one another. And we did. He called me once or twice and told me he was going to fight for the title. And then, stupidly, he went back to Newark, New Jersey and got himself in trouble again. Okay? Made the mistake of coming back. Got in trouble. Now, Scott had been through the prison system with another long-serving convict, the wrongly convicted Reuben Hurricane Carter, and he and Scott became friends. Carter was a world-rated middleweight contender, imprisoned for murders he was later acquitted of. And Scott was a comparative novice when they met in the early 1970s. But according to the warden Hat Rack, Scott was the only guy who lasted 3 or 4 rounds with Reuben when he lined up opportunities in the recreation yard. Yeah, because Reuben Hurricane Carter was a top-rated fighter, top-rated middleweight when he went to prison. He had like 20 or 30 pro fights. He had been in there with people like Emil Griffith, right, before he went to prison. And the warden said Scott was the only one that could last a few rounds with him. He said nobody had ever done that, lasted 3 rounds with Reuben. So that clearly impressed Het Rack. There's a whole story surrounding Reuben Hurricane Carter, Het Rack continued animatedly. I knew Reuben at Trenton State Prison, and the night I took over at Rahway, something was going on, and there was Reuben sitting right in the middle of it. We exchanged greetings, and for some reason, Reuben decided that he was going to take my job as the warden of the prison. So I had to transfer Reuben out of Rahway. Yeah, Reuben he was wrongfully convicted and he became a problem in there. And the warden said he had to transfer Reuben out of there. Now, Het Rack said Carter had been radicalized and told other inmates not to deal with the warden. Yeah, so Reuben had to go. Got transferred out. There's a shot at Rahway State Prison right there. Now, trouble had never been far away in Rahway, New Jersey's most notorious prison. Warring gangs had threatened to take hold of several facilities in the state. There were 2 rival Muslim groups at odds inside Trenton State Prison, sparking bloody revolts and leaving a crimson trail even through segregated facilities. It got so bad that a federal judge ordered that some inmates had to be taken in at Rahway to reduce the amount of violence at Trenton State. Yeah, so it got so bad at Trenton State that they had to separate some of the inmates and send some of them to Rahway. Okay? The last thing I needed was a bloodbath at Rahway because I had quieted things down there, Het Rack said. This is still a warden talking. And I told one of my captains to go and talk to Scotty. I wanted to start a boxing school as a way to maybe bring peace between these 2 factions and give them something important to do in a boxing school. I imagined boxing trades like promoting, managing, cutmen, cornermen, all the trades that surround boxing. And in fact, we had the first referee license from our program. Yeah, one guy that was in it actually came out and became a pro referee that was in Rahway around that time. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So after Scott and Het Rack renewed acquaintances, the top man at Rahway had one thing he wanted to ask the prisoner. I said, James, I want you to build me a boxing school. And he said, yeah, right. How am I going to do that? We talked a lot about it. And he eventually said, you know what? I'll do it. And he did it. And he built me one hell of a boxing school. it ended up bringing peace between those two factions because I was able to recruit Murad Muhammad, who was a Muslim on the other side, to do the promoting. So now we had Scott running the school and fighting, and Murad doing the promoting. And now both sides had something important to lose if they acted up in my prison. And Murad Muhammad ended up coming out being a big time promoter in the 80s. He was in that prison at that time. So on one side of the gangs, they had Scott as a fighter and Murad Muhammad promoting the fights. So peace came between the gangs because they knew if they acted up, they would lose that boxing program they had, right? And that was a big time outlet for them. So they didn't want to lose that. So that created peace in the prison. Now, Murad had been working with Muhammad Ali. And the way Hatrak tells it, Ali had given him some money to start up his own promotional company. Murad promoted the first boxing show in Rahway on September 15, 1975. And they actually charged 500 civilians from the outside to come into a maximum security prison to watch boxing, featuring the program's up-and-coming stars against fighters from around the country. So Murad Muhammad promoted the first card in that prison, and they got 500 people to pay to come in there and watch the fights, right? Mm-hmm. So, can you imagine that, Hatrak laugh? Nobody else in this country would have done that. Now, it's near impossible to believe it today, but things got even stranger as Scott's rise continued when TV networks formed an orderly queue to broadcast his fights from prison. Okay? Yeah. The commentators, Sugar Ray Leonard, Halbert Cosell, the producers, all of them went in there. And they would, civilians would pay the likes of Gil Clancy, Halbert Cosell, and Sugar Ray Leonard went in as part of TV crews who covered Scott's events. And journalists going through all of the security checks were allowed to report on the fights from ringside in the prison. More than that, Scott wrote letters to the boxing magazines and to celebrities. Comedian Bob Hope wrote back to him and invested in the program. So did commentator and fight doctor Freddie Pacheco, who often lent his assistant to Hatrak as one of the program's list of advocates. Pacheco referred to Rahway as the Boxing University. Muhammad Ali also wanted to come to Rahway, Hatrak explained. One of his aides by the name of Kelly came in with $3,000 worth of boxing equipment that Ali had sent, and he wanted to know if he could come in and visit with James Scott. By that time, I was going as warden, and the people that followed me were very envious of the publicity I've been getting. And guess what? They tore the program apart. Can you believe that? Here's a program helping young kids and so forth develop careers. We had a licensed referee, 2 world champions, 3 guys in the New Jersey Hall of Fame, and the state came in and destroyed the program. That's crazy. The program stopped the gang war. Like I said, 2 world champions, a promoter, a referee, and after Hatrak left, the state stopped the program. That was crazy. And that was in spite of warring gang factions finding peace within the prison because of the program. The home to some of America's most violent offenders became sacred ground. Listen to this. One night at the fights, here came the paying customers. And when you know that there's leadership from both sides of each Muslim gang, Hatrak smiled. One group came in, then another came in, and I'm thinking, oh God, this place is going to go up in flames tonight. We started to watch them and followed them. And one of the leaders of one of the Muslim gangs came to me and said, Warden, there's not going to be any trouble in your penitentiary tonight. And I said, How can you assure me of that? And he said, because we consider this holy ground. This is the only place in New Jersey that either side felt safe coming to have what they call a summit conference. That's how it all began. So actually at the prison fights, outside the prison, these gangs was at war. Inside the prison, they was at war. But when they had those fights, they considered that a truce. Would be no kind of violence or fights at these, no kind of gang violence at these fights. And the state came in and stopped it. That was the only place in the entire state where the two gangs had a truce going on at these boxing fights. So why would they end that? That's crazy. Yeah, that was good and crazy. Okay. Together, James Scott and Hatrack made national headlines. The boxing program boomed, and Scott's ascent up the 175-pound ladder quickened with huge 1978 and 1979 wins over top contenders Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, a future WBA champion, perennial contenders Richie Cates and Yaki Lopez, Britain's Bunny Johnson, and the Bull, Jerry Martin. All these top contenders went to the prison to fight this guy, and he was beating them, right? Amazing. He was beating them. Some said Scott wasn't well liked in prison, that there was jealousy about his life or about the privileges, but Hatrack said otherwise. Scotty and I had a close relationship, the former warden admitted. He had his own office as the head of what I called it, the boxing authority. And on my way to lunch, I would stop in every day and talk to Scotty. He let me know who he talked to in boxing, like Pacheco, Freddie Pacheco. And through Pacheco, he actually talked to Muhammad Ali himself a couple of times, okay? Because Ali wanted to come in, but before Ali got a chance to go there, the state stepped in and stopped the program for some reason. That was crazy. Mike Mazik in the building. Salute Mike Mazik. Talking about the 1980s fighters today. And one 1980s fighter was a prison inmate. And they went to the prison and had to fight. And the fights was the only place where these two big rival gangs had peace and had a truce when they had the fights going on. So why would the state step in and stop that? Okay. But Hatrack said, I have my opinions about Scotty. He and I got along extremely well. He built the boxing school for me when I needed one to buy a piece. He did everything I asked him to do, and he never let me down, not once. He trained very, very hard. He did thousands of push-ups a day, and he had all 75 guys in the program out in the yard every morning running laps, rain, shine, sleet, or snow. And he'd do push-ups and shadow box in his snow. It wasn't really a time that you could run into Scotty other than when he was in his office working. When he wasn't working out, I suppose there were some people who didn't like him and were jealous of him because of the privileges he had. Maybe some people didn't like the status that he had in the prison, but you take that for granted. You get some good and some bad with whatever you do. You can't please everybody. You're crazy if you try. Okay. Technique in the building. What's up, Tech? How are you today? We talking about boxers from the 80s. Right now, the inmate that was a world-class contender. You know, the top contender was going into prison fighting him, and he was beating some of them. The salute technique. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, but you can't please everybody. You know, there were some people in the prison, inmates that was jealous of him because of the status he had and the privileges he was getting. But you know, like I said, they had two warring gangs that not only they was at war in prison, they was at war in the streets on the outside. And the only place they had a truce at was when these fights in the prison went on. But for some reason, the state stepped in and ended the program once Hetrick, the warden who started it, had left, moved on. Yeah, that was crazy. Now, Scott picked up the nickname Superman because of his fitness levels and routines that were superhuman. Now, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad would always say Scott's engine was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, while Yaki Lopez and his team thought Scott was possessed and boxed on angel dust, an accusation Hetrick scoffed at. And Yaki Lopez and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad was just two of the top contenders that went into prison and competed against Scott. Yeah. Too many, though, prisoners were envious of what Scott was doing and how he was being treated. But not one correctional officer ever came to me to complain about what was going on with Scott, added the warden Hetrick. Yeah, not one officer complained, but of course, some prisoners going to be jealous. Like I said, you can't please everybody. You're crazy to try to please everybody. Now, after losses to the aforementioned Jerry Martin and then to another future champion, Dwight Muhammad Qawi, then Dwight Braxton, Scott's career was over, and so was the boxing program. It was 1981, and Scott's final stats read 19 wins against 2 losses and a draw. He had 11 fights in 3 years in the prison at one point, being recognized as the WBA's #1 contender before they took their status away from him. They claimed they had known he was in prison. Now that's BS. Now the WBA didn't know he was in prison. Everybody else knew he was in prison. I mean, the cameras and everything was going in there covering his fight. He was the #1 contender. How did they not know he was in prison? Now it's ironic that it came down to Braxton to slam a nail in the casket because he had started his own boxing career, guess where? Right there in Rahway on an armed robbery charge. And he had become Scott's sparring partner. In fact, in the build-up to their fight, Tetchens fled over $400 sparring debt Dwight claimed Scott owed him. Now, Dwight Braxton was in that prison. He went back later to fight Scott when Dwight got out. He started his pro career when he got out. But when Scott was preparing for all these big high-profile fights against contenders coming in to fight him, Dwight Braxton was his main sparring partner, preparing him for these fights, right? So Dwight got out, came back in and fought Scott and beat him. But they didn't like each other because Dwight said Scott owed him $400 from a sparring debt Dwight and Scott owed him when Dwight was preparing him for one of those fights. But isn't that something? Dwight Muhammad Qawi became a world champion, and he was one of Scott's main sparring partners, preparing him for these fights against these contenders in the prison. Yeah. Just Do Boxing in the building. What's up, Just Do? And Dwight didn't start his career until he got out. Just Do coming up at 4. Giving us that balanced, unbiased boxing talk. Giving everybody their Just Do, of course, Just Do Boxing. Yeah, but so Scott ended up with a record of he had 21 total fights, 19 wins, just 2 losses, 1 draw. He lost to Dwight Muhammad Qawi and Jerry the Bull Martin, 2 top contenders. Qawi was the eventual world champion. And he had 11 fights in prison because remember, when he went to prison, he was already 10-0 as a pro when he went in. Okay. So yeah, after he lost to Martin and Scott, everything came to an end. And when the warden that started the program, Bob Hetrick, left, the state entered the program for some reason. And you had these 2 gangs that was warring outside the prison, warring in the prison. And the only truce they had, the sacred ground, was when these fights was going on. It was a truce. No kind of gang warfare during the fights. But the state entered it. That was crazy, right? So there was a lot of bad blood between Dwight and James Hetrick, recall. And Dwight's brother Tony was also a champion, but he had not boxed until he came to the school at Rahway Prison. And Scotty took him under his wing and tutored this guy until he ended up winning a championship. when he got out. Braxton's brother, Tony Braxton, won the USBA middleweight title when he got out. And James Scott was the one that tutored him and got him into boxing, right? Now, the dream had always been for Scott to land the most unlikely of world title shots. And Hetrack, it has to plan. In as many letters to the boxing press from inside the prison, Scott would challenge the champions of the day, like Matthew Saad Muhammad, Mike Rossman, and Victor Galindez, to come into the prison and fight him. But Hetrack had different plans. He wanted Scott to box at the Meadowlands Arena on a supervised furlough. And he said for a while, the Rossman fight for the WBA title was in the works. And I tell you, the WBA was full of shit because the WBA claimed they didn't know it was in prison. He was their number one contender, and they was working on a fight between him and Rossman at the Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey for him to get out on the supervised furlough. So how did the WBA not know he was in prison? When they were working on this fight, to fight the champion Rossman, he was in prison at the time. So the WBA stripped him of the number one contendership, claiming they didn't know it was in prison. That's crazy. They had to know he was in prison. But they was trying to get him out for a fight at the Meadowlands against the champion Mike Rossman, because Mike Rossman was one of the fighters that would refuse to go in and fight him for some reason, right? Now, precedents had been set by that point on people getting out of the prison on furlough, as the warden Hetrack explained, okay? He said, I had an inmate group of singers called the Escorts, and they were the first inmate singing group to ever cut. Excuse me for a minute. Okay, here we go. They were the first inmate singing group to ever cut an album inside a maximum security prison. And the album sold over 300,000 copies. Okay? The warden said proudly. And he started that program. He said whatever you wanted to do, he was going. If you wanted to sing, he started a music program. You wanted to paint, he started an art program. You wanted to fight, he started a boxing program. Okay? So yeah, this singing group actually cut an album in the prison and sold 300,000 copies. Wow. But anyway, there was a precedent for people coming out of the prison on supervised furlough, because the singing group actually went to Newark, New Jersey, this place called Symphony Hall, and did a live performance there, right? And it was under something called an escorted furlough. The singers had correctional officers as escorts, and they got rave publicity. The crowd loved it. And they went out there to the Symphony Hall in Newark, New Jersey. And the event went extremely well. And the warden said he was in the process of hooking up that same thing for James Scott, but it just never got to happen. And James is in there on a murder charge for life and everything too, so that probably kind of stood in the way. A lesser charge. Murder wasn't involved, but they never arranged him to get out and fight, because Rossman wouldn't come in. A lot of the big names, Jerry the Bull Martin, Matthew Saad Muhammad, the White Muhammad Kwabi, because the White had been in there as an inmate. But when he got out and turned pro, he went back and fought Scott. But for some reason, Mike Rossman wouldn't go in and fight him. It wasn't just the boxing program that thrived with talented inmates. Russell Peltz, who promoted Jerry Martin, saw it firsthand when he took the Bull in to fight Scott. Russell Peltz, Jerry the Bull Martin's promoter, when he was in the prison, he said, all the seats were on the floor, but they had this giant picture window, and the prison band was playing outside it. And I've got to tell you, you couldn't get better playing than that, Peltz said. I remember saying to someone, too bad these guys aren't on the outside. They'd make a lot of money. There was a lot of talent in that place, about in the prison. Mm-hmm. This was a promoter. He said there was a lot of talent in there. Yeah, not on my watch. That's the book the warden wrote once he retired and everything. Not on my watch. Now, a decade earlier in 1971, there had been a riot inside the Broadway Auditorium, and the place had been left derelict. When Hetrick took over, he decided to change that. The wire mesh, broken furniture, and vandalized walls were all replaced. And in Hetrick's words, he turned it into a mecca for positive progress. He used prisoners on vocational programs to renovate and replace everything. And with no boxing ring, the inmates built a boxing ring too. Initially, the Broadway fights were in the yard, but by the time Scott had his bigger fights, they were in the auditorium because they built the boxing ring in there. My mission was to get people ready to go home, but not to go home and do something I told them to do. I wanted them to go home and do what it was they felt they wanted to do. That's what I call self-rehabilitation, Hetrick said. The fact of the matter is, whether the guy is a murderer, a lifer or not, they all go home. Whether they go home with a tag on their toe, they go home on parole or in the box, with a tag on their toe. They go home many different ways, and I always felt that I didn't want to write anybody off given the nature of their crime, so long as they were about the right thing. And guess what? Scotty eventually went home. After 30 years in prison in 2005, he went home to Trenton, New Jersey. And the warden said that's where he was raised. And he went back to a gym where the warden boxed as a kid. And his parole officer set him up there to work with kids, and he was devoted to him. So here was someone everyone said was a murderer, and look what he did. He went home and worked with the kids. Scott helped out former 1968 Olympian Sammy Goss at Goss and Goss Boxing. And Sammy would say how good James was with the children. But as time wore on after James' release, his health faltered, and struggling with dementia, he was mute and wheelchair bound in a New Jersey rest home. He died on May 18, 2018, age 71. He and Hetrick had not reconnected in later years. Hetrick didn't know that Scott bore the scars of an attack in prison. Okay. Scott was sliced open from his ear to the front of his neck, and it took 150 stitches to close the cut, right? Wow, 150 stitches. But he did know, however, the warden didn't even know about that one. He did know, however, that 3 members of his boxing authority made it into the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. 3 members that came out of that prison made it into the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. James Scott, Dwight Muhammad Qualley, and referee Eddie Johnson. He actually had a referee that came out of there and got his license and became a referee, made it into the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. And 2 inmates became career cornermen. And Bob Hetrick is in his 80s now. He was warden between 1973 and 1979. And when he left, the Attorney General said he couldn't tell him why he was being moved on, or else Hetrick would have grounds to sue the state. Okay? Yeah, but when he left, they ended the program for some reason. That was good and crazy. That was the only place where the gangs didn't fight at the boxing matches. They had a truce there. Right? Now, Hetrick moved out to Portland, Oregon to live with one of his daughters. He has another daughter in Virginia and a son in Las Vegas. He lives a quiet life, but has happy memories of the history he made behind the walls of Rahway State Prison. And he wrote a book about his time there titled, Not on My Watch. It's always on my mind, he concluded, clearly content with what he did and passionate about his reasons for doing it. There's a nostalgic pride when he reflects and puts himself back alongside some of America's works. And you can see the emotion when he talks and smiles, saying, I think about it a lot. Yeah, that was about the prison inmate. James Scott. Yeah. He went into the prison to watch his fights. Now let's talk about some fights. Some great fights that happened in the 80s. We got some fights. I want to talk about the fights first. I got five great fights that happened in the 80s. Let's talk about them first. Okay. The first one is Michael Spinks and Dwight Muhammad Qawi. I believe that's it right there. Nope, that ain't it. Let's see. Michael Spinks and Dwight Muhammad Qawi. Yeah, okay, there's a shot of it. Let's talk about that fight. We're going to talk about some fights now. This is light heavyweights of the 1980s. Okay, excuse me for a minute. Appreciate everybody stopping through today. One moment. I'm on the way back. These are five of the top light heavyweight fights of the 80s. Probably the best decade of all for the light heavyweight division, the most talented 175-pounders, and some of the greatest fights that happened in that decade, in that division. Okay, let's talk about a couple of them. I got five of them. Then we're going to talk about some fighters that competed in the decade too. Okay. But first, the fights. Now, the best light heavyweight fights of the 1980s were defined by intense matchups between technical masters and relentless brawlers, featuring legends like Michael Spinks, Dwight Muhammad Qawi, and Matthew Saad Muhammad. The top fights of the era include Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Yaki Lopez 2, 1980, and Michael Spinks versus Dwight Muhammad Qawi, which happened in 1983. And the first one is going to be Michael Spinks versus Dwight Muhammad Qawi, March 18th, 1983. Now, this was the fight that the light heavyweight division needed at that time. Spinks, the cultured and unbeaten WBA champion, facing off against the Camden Buzzsaw, Dwight Muhammad Qawi, the WBC title holder, to see who the real king of the 175-pound division was. A cursory glance at both men in action would seem to point to an easy night for Spinks, but this fight was anything but. A famously difficult opponent to figure out, Qawi proved his right to have worn the famous green belt by extending Spinks more than any other light heavyweight managed over 15 grueling rounds. But Spinks produced a fine effort in the 15th to make sure of a close but not at all controversial decision. Okay? Another great fight in the late 80s. Jeff Harding versus Dennis Andres 1, June 24th, 1989. June 24th, 1989. It is Harding and Andres. Andres on the left, Harding on the right. 24th, 1989. Now this was a doozy here. Now Dennis Andres, one of the most remarkable characters in the history of British boxing, was enjoying some much-deserved late career success in 1989. He was at least 37, although his true age was always debatable, since he always claimed to be much older. Whatever the truth of his age, he was in his second tenure as WBC champion and was a much improved fighter under the tutelage of legendary Kronk trainer Emanuel Stewart. He was almost unrecognizable from the unpromising raw material who had been booed out of the ring after his feeble first bid for the British title against Tom Collins 7 years previously. He was the favorite to retain his crown against the pug-nosed, snarling Australian Jeff Hardy, who arrived with an impressive knockout record against nondescript opposition down under. But the younger man proved he had guts to go with his power, absorbing many punishing blows as well as some stray elbows from Andres, and he gave as good as he got. The Guyana-born Brit scored a highly questionable knockdown in the middle rounds, and though the fight had been a brutal one, held a lead going into the 12th and final round. But he tottered on the brink of being stopped in the 11th, and that 1 minute break clearly wasn't enough. Realizing that he was still hurt and groggy, Harding tore into him right away in the 12th round, flooring him twice. Andres, as always, was brave, rising each time, but he was a beaten man. And after another barrage of unanswered blows, the referee threw his arms around him and signaled the end of an epic fight. Okay, Prince Charles Williams versus Bobby Chaz. Prince Charles Williams versus Bobby Chaz. There's a shot of Prince Charles Williams there. Another great fighter from the 1980s decade. And this fight was October 29th, 1987. Now, Bobby Chaz was destined to win this fight, or so everyone thought. An exciting fighter with a telegenic personality, Chaz was building a great fan base in America at the time. And the Vegas matchup was designed to be another stepping stone to his eventual domination of the light heavyweight division. Now, Williams, arriving with an unspectacular record, was widely expected to offer little threat to Chaz. And early on, everything went according to plan. Bobbing, weaving, and throwing a great variety of punches, Chaz looked like $1 million in the opening round and floored the challenger with a booming straight right hand in the final seconds of round 2. The bell likely saved Williams, who was forced to take another count in the 3rd round. Now, what happened next was a truly incredible comeback. As if galvanized by the hostile pro-Chaz crowd, Williams began some bobbing and weaving of his own. The naturally bigger man, he began to turn it into an inside fight and overwhelmed Chaz with a short left hooks and uppercuts. By the 7th round, the ringside doctor was anxiously examining Chaz's right eye, which was becoming little more than a slit. Fearing the worst, Chaz rallied to win the 8th round, but the 9th round belonged to Williams, who just couldn't miss with his left hook all of a sudden. After 9 thrilling rounds, the ringside doctor decided that Chaz had no business continuing and waved the fight off. It was a great win for Williams, who had looked totally down and out just 6 rounds earlier. Now, this is the one here. Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Yaki Lopez 2. July 13th, 1980. And Miracle Matt their nickname had never been more appropriate. Other than this fight right here. Okay, the nickname Miracle Matt. Listen to this, okay? Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Yaki Lopez 2. July 13th, 1980. Alvaro Yaki Lopez may have made a solid world champion in many other eras, but can count himself unlucky to have competed in a generation of truly outstanding 175-pound fighters. Now, John Conte had turned back his first attempt at winning the WBC title a few years earlier, and this was his second crack at Saad Muhammad, who now held the green belt. And for long periods in this unbelievable fight, it looked as if Yaki might finally claim it. By this time, the boxing public knew what to expect from Saad Muhammad. Sheer fireworks, basically. But even Dave must have been amazed by the ferocity of the early exchanges in this fight. There was little feeling out or probing. Instead, just about every punch was thrown to produce a knockout. And against many lesser opponents, a knockout certainly would have occurred. Now, watching Saad Muhammad in action, it was always amazing how he was able to absorb such a merciless amount of punishment, doing nothing but having his head rocked backwards and sideways by thunderous blows, and then come back with an even more vicious attack of his own, out of nowhere. Round 8 of this fight was, for all intents and purposes, the real-life equivalent of a scene from a Rocky movie. Trapped on the ropes, Saad Muhammad, senseless, seemingly scrambled, took an unbelievable amount of hard punches to head and body. The title seemed to be slipping away from him, and any referee would have been forgiven for stopping the fight right then and there. And somehow, Saad Muhammad got through the round. But Yaqui Lopez's confidence was bolstered, and he soon had Saad Muhammad in trouble again, throwing everything he had at him, as Saad desperately covered up as best he could. And incredibly, there was a hint of a smile on Saad's face as all of this was happening. Then, out of nowhere, Saad Muhammad found a second wind and began marching forward again, working Lopez over with energy-sapping body shots. By the 12th round, Saad Muhammad had evened things up on the scorecards against all odds, and a strong 13th round put him in control of the fight. Lopez seemed as if he could not believe Saad Muhammad had not went down, and in the 14th round, Saad Muhammad dropped him with a flush left hook to the head. Lopez got up, but Saad put him down again immediately. Lopez was knocked down twice more in the round before the referee stepped in, handing Saad Muhammad the most incredible win of his Thriller-Minute career. And like I said, the nickname Miracle Matthew in this fight was never more appropriate. Yeah, that was a crazy one there. Saad Muhammad and Yaqui Lopez. And then finally, Michael Spinks and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. This was February 25th, 1984. Michael Spinks versus Eddie Davis, February 25th, 1984. Now, Spinks defeated Davis by unanimous decision to retain his undisputed light heavyweight title. Now, the 12-round fight took place at Resorts International in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Spinks controlled the early rounds with counterpunches, and he managed to land right hands over Davis's low left guard. Now, Davis found success in the middle round by using his jab to negate Spinks' own jab. And Davis also had some success landing some uppercuts in the round. In the 9th round, Davis had Spinks in trouble, stumbling around the ring after a 4-punch combination. But Davis couldn't follow up as he began to tire, and Spinks regained control to finish the fight strongly. Now, the fight was competitive enough that Michael's older brother, former heavyweight champion Leon Spinks, reportedly rushed the ringside from the audience during the second half of the fight to encourage his brother. But the fight was closer than some of Spinks' previous defenses reflected in the varied scorecard from the judges, at least one of them. Joe Cortez had it 119-109. Larry Hazard had it 118-111. Here's a close one. Carl Castellano had it 115-114, all in favor of Spinks. Spinks successfully defended his WBA, WBC, and IBF light heavyweight titles. Okay, now let's look at some of these great fighters from the 1980s. Al Booger in the building. What's up, Al Booger? Looking at some light heavyweights of the 1980s today. Looked at the guy that was in prison, and they took all the cameras and the commentators and the contenders. Everybody went into the prison to fight him. WBA had him number one at one point in his career. Yes, they did. Let's start out with Yaqui Lopez. He never won a title, but he's considered probably the greatest light heavyweight never to win a title. Yaqui Lopez, yes, he was. Let's start with him. Okay? Yaqui. There's Yaqui right there. We're just going to take a look at some of these great light heavyweights from the 1980s, probably the best decade of all four light heavyweights. Yaqui Lopez. Alvaro Yaqui Lopez is a legendary former pro boxer, widely regarded as one of the greatest light heavyweights to never win a world title. As of March 2026, he remains a beloved figure in the boxing community, living in Stockton, California, where he recently celebrated his 74th birthday. Lopez was a mainstay of the light heavyweight division during the late 1970s and early 1980s, an era renowned for its depth and talent. He retired in 1984 with a pro record of 61 wins, 15 losses, 39 by knockout. He fought for the world championship 5 times, 4 at light heavyweight and once at cruiserweight, but was unsuccessful in each fight, often in highly competitive or controversial fights. His most famous battles were against Matthew Saad Muhammad, the fight we just talked about. The 1980 rematch was named the Ring Magazine's Fight of the Year, and it featured a brutal 8th round, often cited as one of the greatest in boxing history. Okay, and that was the round of the year for 1980. He faced the who's who of boxing legends, including John Conte, Victor Galindez, Michael Spinks, and Carlos de Leon. After boxing, Lopez settled in Stockton, California, and opened the Yaqui Lopez Fat City Boxing Club, where he has spent decades training young fighters and giving back to his community. He was inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame in 2007 and the West Coast Boxing Hall of Fame in 2023. Currently age 74, Lopez is retired from training fighters, but still visits his gym. Despite physical wear from his career and a back injury sustained at a post-boxing job, he remains active, walking daily and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Yaqui Lopez. Okay, let's look at some other fighters from the 80s, 1980s. Okay, Michael Spinks. Take a look at Mike. There he is. I believe that's Holmes. Yeah, we're just going to look at some these legendary 1980s fighters. Tomorrow and Wednesday, we got some fights from the decade. Okay, we're going to look at a whole bunch of fights, epic fights from the 1980s, briefly, Tuesday and Wednesday. Excuse me for 1 minute, please. Okay. Yeah. Now let's look at some of these great fighters, because I'm like I always harp about the 1950s is the greatest decade of middleweights. I'm always harping about the 1980s as the greatest decade of light heavyweights. So let's prove it. Let's look at some of these great fighters that competed in that decade. Michael Spinks was like the ruler of it, king of the light heavyweights in the 1980s. Let's take a look at Mike Spinks. He was undisputed champion, 3-belt, WBA, WBC, International Boxing Federation, IBF. Okay. Michael the Spinks Jinx Spinks. These are just brief little talks about these fighters. All right. How's everybody today? Monday. Everybody have a good weekend. That's good. Okay, Michael Spinks. Okay. Now, Michael Spinks, American former pro boxer. Now, he competed from 1977 to 1988, 11-year career. He achieved Olympic gold and world championships in 2 weight classes, including a historic transition from light heavyweight to heavyweight. He was born on July 13, 1956, in St. Louis, Missouri. Spinks grew up in a tough neighborhood alongside his older brother, Leon, both of whom pursued boxing to escape hardship. Yeah, Leon said if you couldn't fight, you would get your ass whipped every day where they grew up at. So, as an amateur, Michael compiled a 93-win, 7-loss record, 100 fights on the dot, and he won the National Golden Gloves middleweight title in 1976 before claiming Olympic gold in the middleweight division at the Montreal Games that year, defeating Rufat Ratskayab of the Soviet Union in the final. Now, Mike had a good draw because out of the 5 fights, he only fought twice. For some reason, the first 3 fights, he got buys, right? Or the other fight, nobody showed up to fight him. He just fought the semifinal and the final fight for the gold medal, 2 fights. Turning pro in April 1977 under manager Butch Lewis and trainer Eddie Futch, Spinks quickly rose through the ranks with an undefeated streak, capturing the WBA light heavyweight title in July 1981 by defeating Eddie Mustafa Muhammad by unanimous decision over 15 rounds. He unified the light heavyweight crowns by winning the WBC version against the white Muhammad Qawi in 1983 and adding the IBF belt in 1984 against Yaki Lopez, defending the titles against top contenders like Marvin Johnson and Qawi in a rematch. In a groundbreaking move, Spinks challenged for the heavyweight division title while still the undisputed light heavyweight champion, becoming the first to win a heavyweight world title by outpointing IBF champion Larry Holmes over 15 rounds on September 21st, 1985. He vacated his light heavyweight titles afterward, so he was the first current light heavyweight champion to win the heavyweight title. Archie Moore tried it back in the 50s, but Archie Moore fell short when he fought Floyd Patterson for the vacant title in the 50-something. He was the current light heavyweight champion, but Floyd beat him. Now, Spinks defended his IBF heavyweight title against Holmes in a 1986 rematch and later defeated Jerry Cooney in 1987, maintaining a perfect 31-0 record, 21 knockouts, until his final fight. On June 27, 1988, he faced undisputed heavyweight champion Mike Tyson, because Spinks had been stripped of the IBF, right? So Mike was undisputed. So he faced Mike Tyson in Atlantic City, where Tyson knocked him out in 91 seconds of the first round, ending Spinks' undefeated run and prompting his immediate retirement at age 31. Recognized for his technical skill, jab, and the signature Spinks Jinx Punch, he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1994. And as part of the modern category. Yeah, and the Spinks Jinx was just a extraordinary straight right hand. Wasn't nothing but a straight right hand, but it was extraordinary straight right hand. The Spinks Jinx, yeah. Okay, it wasn't your ordinary straight right hand, but that's what it was. Okay. Dwight Muhammad Qawi is next. There's Dwight fighting Holyfield, the real deal, Holyfield. Yeah, Dwight was the first one to say Holyfield was on that stuff, PEDs. And then it was basically proven because this guy named Evan Fields was going there buying PEDs from this pharmacy, right? And a lot of people said that's Evander Holyfield. Said Evan Fields is Evander Holyfield. So this reporter got Evan Fields' number from this pharmacy and called the number, and guess who answered the phone? Evander Holyfield. So do the math. But Dwight Muhammad Qualley, true story. And Dwight said, "See, I told y'all." Mm-hmm. He was on that stuff. But Dwight Muhammad Qualley, he was renowned for his aggressive swarming style and success as a 2-division world champion, despite his compact 5'7" frame. Competing from 1978 to 1998, he amassed a record of 41 wins, 11 losses, and 1 draw, with 25 knockouts, and earned the nickname the Camden Buzzsaw for his relentless pressure fighting out of Camden, New Jersey. Qualley's career highlights included capturing the WBC and the Ring Magazine light heavyweight titles by stopping Matthew Saad Muhammad in the 10th round in December 1981. That takes some doing, stopping Matthew Saad Muhammad, but Dwight did it, okay? And he made 3 successful defenses before losing it to Michael Spinks in 1983, and later winning the WBA Cruiserweight title by an 11th round knockout of Payet Cruz in July 1985. And Dwight was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2004, recognizing his contributions to the sport, including memorable fights against future heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield, whom he challenged for the undisputed cruiserweight crown in 1986. And after that fight, Holyfield said during that fight, he started to quit. That fight was so tough. Holyfield said he started to throw the towel in. Now, born in Baltimore, Maryland, and raised in Camden, New Jersey, Qualley faced early hardships, including incarceration in the mid-1970s for armed robbery, during which he discovered boxing through a prison program without any prior amateur experience. That was the very prison program we talked about at the top of the show. And James Scott, the inmate that all these top-level boxers went in to fight, Dwight was his main sparring partner in getting James Scott ready for fights. Dwight Muhammad Qualley. Because Dwight didn't start fighting pro until he left prison. But he was James Scott's main sparring partner to prepare him for these fights. Yep. Now, after his release from prison in 1978, Dwight turned pro in April 1978 at age 25, quickly rising through the ranks with a string of knockouts and adopting the name Dwight Muhammad Qualley in 1982 after converting to Islam. His light heavyweight reigns featured intense wars, such as the first fight with Saad Muhammad, often hailed as one of boxing's greatest rivalries. And he later transitioned to cruiserweight to avoid larger opponents, securing his second title before challenging at a heavyweight in the late 1980s and 1990s. Wait a minute, that didn't make sense. Transitioned to cruiserweight to avoid larger opponents. Cruiserweight is a larger division, so he wouldn't avoid, but he transitioned to cruiserweight, securing his second title before challenging at heavyweight in the late 1980s and 1990s for George Foreman. That was a huge size differential. But Dwight held his own. He ended up getting stopped, but he held his own for a while against Big George. Qualley's later years were marked by health struggles, including a 5-year battle with pugilistic dementia, which contributed to his death at age 72. Despite retiring in 1998 after a long career that spanned 3 weight classes, his legacy endures as a symbol of perseverance, having transformed from a troubled youth to a Hall of Fame warrior who entertained fans with his high-volume punching and unyielding heart. Dwight Muhammad Qualley. Okay, we're just looking at some of these killers in the light heavyweight division from the 1980s. Arguably the best decade ever for light heavyweights. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad he was one of the fighters that was willing to go into the prison and fight James Scott. And world champion Mike Rossman of the WBA, where Scott was ranked #1, he refused to go in because his father, Mike Rossman's father, was his trainer. He went in there and watched Scott fight. And he admitted, ain't no way I'm bringing my son in here to fight this monster. Yeah, Mike Rossman's father said that. I am not bringing my son in here to fight this monster. Right? He wanted to keep that title. So, but they were willing to fight him, if Scott could come out. But the man had life for murder. They knew the man wasn't coming out fighting nobody. So yeah, that was just basically a way of ducking. Saying we'll fight him if he comes out, but the man had life imprisonment for murder. How was he going to come out? He did get out in 2005. That was way after his boxing career then. Yeah. So basically a duck. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically a duck. Yeah, that's such thing as ducking. That's a perfect example of one. The man in prison, you got the opportunity to go in there and fight him, but you'll say you'll fight him if he come out. But the man in prison for life for murder. That's just like outpricing yourself, putting a price on a fight the other fighter ain't going to accept, right? Or demanding a price you ain't going to get. That's basically the same thing. Telling a convicted murderer of life in prison, if he gets out, you'll fight him, right? But the warden did try to make some arrangements, but they was like, nah, we can't do it. So, but a lot of people like this guy right here, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, went into the prison and fought him and got beat. Eddie went in there and James Scott beat him. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, he was a former boxer and trainer and competed in the light heavyweight division from 1972 to 1988, amassing a record of 50 wins, 8 losses, 1 draw, 39 by knockout. He was born in Brooklyn, New York. He began boxing as a teenager at the Police Athletic League in Brownsville and achieved amateur success by winning the New York Golden Gloves middleweight title in 1971. And guess who he beat? The great Vito Antuofermo, future middleweight champion. And then in 1972, he beat Patrick Maloney, also serving as an alternate for the 1972 U.S. Olympic team. That means he lost in the Olympic trials final, right? Came one fight short of making the team, but that one that lost in the final gets to travel as an alternate in case something happens to the winner of the Olympic trial, the member of the team. So yeah, he was an alternate on that 1972 team, probably at middleweight in the amateurs. Now he made his pro debut on September 16th, 1972, stopping Dave Wyatt in the 4th round, and quickly rose through the ranks with wins over notable opponents such as Willie Klassen, Sugar Hart, Mario Rosa, and Matthew Franklin, who later became Matthew Saad Muhammad, right? Beat Saad Muhammad early in his career. He challenged for a world title in 1977, losing a decision to Victor Galindez for the WBA light heavyweight championship before capturing the WBA version on March 31st, 1980 by stopping Marvin Johnson in the 11th round. Marvin, another one of the great 1980s light heavyweights. Victor Galindez, he retired in 1980, okay? But he was around that era of these great light heavyweight fighters. Now, Muhammad defended the belt twice against Jerry the Bull Martin by 5th round TKO in May 1980 and Rudy Koopman by 4th round TKO in November 1980 before losing it to Michael Spinks by unanimous decision in July 1981. Later career highlights included a failed heavyweight bid against Renato Snipes in May 1981. He lost by split decision to Snipes, and a 1985 challenge for the vacant IBF light heavyweight title, which he lost by split decision to Slobodan Kakar. After retiring in 1988, Muhammad transitioned into training, basing himself in Las Vegas and guiding fighters like Iran Barkley to world titles in 1992, including the IBF super middleweight title, defeating Duran Van Horn, and the WBA light heavyweight title, defeating Thomas Hearns. Yeah, Barkley. Mustafa was his trainer in those fights. And Chad Dawson to multiple light heavyweight championships. So Barkley beat some big names under Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Duran Van Horn, Thomas Hearns, and Chad Dawson. And remember the boxing union we was talking about last week? Eddie Mustafa Muhammad was the one that founded that. He founded the Joint Association of Boxers, the JAB, in affiliation with the Teamsters Union, which provided medical and health benefits to over 2,000 pro fighters while it was going on. He was originally nicknamed the Flame during his early career under manager Ben Muhammad. He adopted his current name after converting to Islam in the early 1970s, and he was inducted into the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame in 1999. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Okay? You're just talking about some fighters, some of the great light heavyweights from the 80s. Marvin Johnson, another tough, these were some tough guys. You had to bring your lunch pail when you were fighting these guys in the 80s. They look tough. Look at them. Yeah. I see them the kind of guys, you walking down the street, you cross over to the other side, man. See them coming. I'm crossing the street. Marvin Johnson. Another tough light heavyweight from the 80s. Now Marvin Johnson, he competed from 1973 to 1987, a 14-year career. He was a hard-hitting southpaw from Indianapolis, Indiana, nicknamed Pops. He achieved 3 world championships during a competitive era, capturing the WBC light heavyweight title in 1978 by defeating Mate Parlov, and the WBA light heavyweight title twice, in 1979 against Victor Galindez and in 1986 against Leslie Stewart. His pro record ended up at 43 wins, 6 losses, no draws, 35 knockouts, showcasing his knockout power. That's 81.4% knockout rate. Okay, over 80. So before turning pro, Johnson had a distinguished amateur career, beginning boxing at age 14 and winning the 1971 National Golden Glove light heavyweight and 1972 middleweight championships, as well as the 1971 National AAU light heavyweight titles. At the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, he secured a bronze medal in the middleweight division after advancing to the semifinals, where he was defeated by Soviet boxer Vyacheslav Limashev. So he was the one to beat Eddie Mustafa in the Olympic trials. Remember, Eddie Mustafa was the alternate, lost to Marvin Johnson in the Olympic trials final, and Marvin came in second place, got the bronze in the Olympics. So hey, medal at the Olympics, not bad. Lost to the Russian boxer. The Russian boxer was probably in his 30s or something, you know. But Johnson's pro highlights include intense rivalries, such as his 2 fights with Matthew Saad Muhammad, including a 1979 loss of the WBC title in their rematch, but delivering memorable awards that highlight his aggressive style and durability. He also challenged undefeated future heavyweight champion Michael Spinks in 1981, losing by 4th-round knockout in a non-title fight that underscored the depth of 1980s light heavyweight talent. That's what we're talking about. Retiring after 1987 title loss to Leslie Stewart, Johnson was later inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame in 2008 recognizing his contributions to the sport despite financial struggles and promotional issues throughout his career. Marvin Johnson, 3-time light heavyweight champion, though. Okay? Should be in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Yeah. We did Yaki first. Another shot of Yaki. Mike Rossman, former WBA champion. That's Mike on the right. Damn, both of them could be Mike. That's Mike on the right. Mike Rossman. Mike Rossman. Okay, let's finish this up and get up out of here. Mike Rossman. Let's talking about some light heavyweights today. Mike Rossman. Yeah, Mike's father said he wasn't taking his son in that prison to fight that monster. I think he was in there for the Eddie Mustafa. His father, I believe, was in there for the Eddie Mustafa Muhammad fight when Scott beat him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike Rossman. That's Mike on the right. Mike Rossman. American boxer of Jewish and Italian heritage. And Mike competed from 1973 to 1983. He was best known as the Jewish Bomber for his aggressive style and cultural symbolism in the ring, including wearing a Star of David on his trunks, like Max Baer. Mike held the WBA light heavyweight title from September 1978 to April 1979 after defeating defending champion Victor Galindez by 13th round TKO in an upset victory at the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans. That's him and Victor Galindez right there. That's Victor on the left. Mm-hmm. Victor retired in 1980. With a pro record of 44 wins, 7 losses, 3 draws, 27 by knockout, Rossman turned pro at age 18 following 23 amateur fights, literally compiling 22 straight wins while underage before his first official loss in 1975. Born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to an Italian father, James DiPiano, and Jewish mother, Celia Rossman. He adopted his mother's maiden name for his boxing career as part of a family agreement to honor his heritage. His mother was Jewish, his father was Italian. Used his mother's name in boxing. Okay. Standing at 5 feet 11 inches with an orthodox stance, he debuted as a pro on August 10th, 1973, stopping Stanley Dawson in the second round, and quickly rising through the ranks with notable wins over Mike Quarry in 1976 and 1977, Mike Nixon, including a 1975 rematch knockout, Christy Elliott, and Gary Summerhays. His championship reign included one successful defense against Aldo Traversaro in December 1978, but ended in a 4th round loss to Galindez in the April 14, 1979 rematch at the same New Orleans venue. Following his title loss, Rossman faced further setbacks, including a 6th round knockout defeat to Marvin Johnson in June 1980 for the vacant WBA light heavyweight crown, and a unanimous decision loss to future Hall of Famer Dwight Muhammad Qawi in May 1981. He fought sporadically thereafter, securing wins against lesser opposition before retiring at age 28 after a November 1983 points loss to David Johns, concluding a decade-long career marked by his rapid ascent to world championship status at just 23 years old. Inducted into the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame in 1995, Rossman later lived quietly in Atlantic City, New Jersey, working as a trainer and avoiding the financial pitfalls that plagued many peers, remaining a cultural icon for Jewish boxing enthusiasts. Mike Rossman. 2 more, and that's it. Virgil Hill. Virgil came on a little later in the decade, I guess. Virgil Hill. There's Virgil. Facing us. Virgil Hill. Just looking at some of the great light heavyweight fighters of the 1980s. Virgil Hill. Now, Virgil competed from 1984 to 2007, 23 years, and made a brief comeback in 2015. He was best known for his accomplishments as a 2-division world champion in the light heavyweight and cruiserweight divisions. Born Virgil Eugene Hill on January 18, 1964, in Clinton, Missouri, he was raised in North Dakota, where he developed his skills and earned the nickname Quicksilver for his exceptional hand speed and jab. With a pro record of 51 wins, 7 losses, 24 knockouts across 58 pro fights, Hill's career highlights include winning Olympic silver as a middleweight in 1984 and capturing the WBA light heavyweight title 5 times, along with 2 stints as WBA cruiserweight champion. Hill's amateur career was marked by outstanding success, compiling a 288-11 record over 299 fights, one short of 100, before turning pro. He claimed the 1984 National Golden Glove middleweight title and advanced to the finals of the Los Angeles Olympics, where he carried a silver medal after a controversial loss to Puerto Rico's Luis Ortiz in the gold medal fight. Silver is second, bronze is third. Marvin Johnson came in third. I said second with the bronze, but that's third place. My bad. Silver is second place. He lost to Luis Ortiz controversially in the 84 Olympics in a gold medal fight in Los Angeles. Then transitioning to the pro ranks, Hill debuted with a second-round TKO at Madison Square Garden, and he quickly rose through the ranks, capturing the vacant WBA light heavyweight title in 1987 by stopping Leslie Stewart in the 4th round. He defended the belt 10 times against notable challenges, including unanimous decisions over Bobby Ches and Tyrone Booz, and a first-round knockout of James Kitchen, establishing himself as a dominant force with a defensive, technically proficient style. In 1991, Hill lost his title to Thomas Hearns by majority decision, but rebounded in 1992 by defeating Frank Tate to reclaim the WBA crown, which he defended another 10 times over the next 5 years. Key victories during this period included a split decision over IBF champion Henry Mass in 1996, solidified his status as one of the division's elite, though a unification attempt against WBO champion Darius Michaelczewski ended in a controversial loss in 1997. Moving up to cruiserweight later in his career, Hill won the WBA title in 2000 with a first-round stoppage of Fabrice Tiazo, becoming a 2-weight world champion at age 36. He lost the belt to John Mark Mormack in 2002, but regained it in 2006 against Valerie Brudo by unanimous decision before retiring in 2007 following defeats to Mass and Ferrat Arslan. A brief 2015 comeback year, then 1 win before his final retirement. Hill's legacy endures through his induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2013 and recognition as North Dakota's Theodore Roosevelt Rough Rider in 2023, honoring his contributions to the sport in his home state. Standing at 6 feet and a half inches with a 77-inch reach, he fought in an orthodox stance and was praised for his tactical acumen and resilience, amassing 24 knockouts while facing top competition across 2 decades. And finally, Prince Charles Williams. And that's it. Prince Charles Williams. Light heavyweights of the 1980s. Okay, let's talk about Prince Charles. That is the final one of the day. Yeah, that's Prince Charles. Prince Charles Williams competed from 1978 to 1996. He was best known for holding the International Boxing Federation light heavyweight title from 1987 to 1993. He had a 6-year reign. He was born in Columbus, Mississippi. He moved to Mansfield, Ohio at age 7, where he began boxing after following his older brother to a local gym and amassed an amateur record of 34 wins and 2 losses, including a runner-up finish in the 1977 Junior Olympics. Williams turned pro at age 16, compiling a career record of 37 wins, 7 losses, and 3 draws, with 28 knockouts, 75.6 ratio. Over 47 fights and 251 rounds fought primarily in the light heavyweight division. He captured the IBF Light Heavyweight Championship in October 1987 by defeating Bobby Chaz by technical knockout in the 9th round in Las Vegas, Nevada. Then he made 8 successful defenses against opponents, including Chaz in a 1989 rematch. Frankie Swindell, Mawehu Beya, James Kitchen, Vincent Boulware, and Freddie Delgado, before losing the title to Henry Mass by unanimous decision in March 1993 in Dusseldorf, Germany. Notable later fights included a loss to undefeated super middleweight champion James Lights Out Toney in July 1994, and a draw followed by a loss to North American Boxing Federation light heavyweight title challenge against Merky Sosa in 1995. Throughout his career, Williams, standing at 6 feet 2 inches with an orthodox stance, overcame early setbacks like his pro debut loss and the 1984 defeat to Hall of Famer Marvin Johnson while competing internationally in venues across Europe. Post-retirement, the Mansfield native, now 62 and residing in Columbus, Ohio, has dedicated himself to mentoring young boxers at Tim Carper's gym in Mansfield, Ohio, serving as a church deacon and inspiring local youth. In 2021, the city honored Williams by naming a portion of Harker Avenue as Prince Charles Williams Street. There you have it. Light heavyweights of the 1980s, okay? And that's going to be it for today.